100% オレンジジュース。
Character analysis. Suguri has a relatively offensive stat spread of +1, -1, and +2. Her positive stat total adds up to 3, which is a lot higher than most characters who only have a positive stat total of 2. This, along with her cute knee socks, may make her seem very appealing at first, but you have to remember that 2 of those 3 points are in evasion, and evasion is a pretty bad stat. +2 in attack or +2 in defense is much more valuable than +2 in evasion. And this is in addition to her -1 defense, which we can't just ignore, and her meager 4 HP. All of this compounded makes her very fragile and prone to being killed. Let's look at some numbers. If a 5 is rolled against Suguri, she has a 50% chance of dying if she evades because she'll need to roll a 6 or higher. If she defends, she still has a 1 in 3 chance of dying to a 5, and even defensive characters with -1 attack can and will eventually roll a 5, which will put her in a tight spot. Despite all of this, if you still insist on playing Suguri, you should play in a way that can cover for your inherent weaknesses. Suguri should generally try to aim for the star norma and play passively. In the early game, it's recommended to evade often, as dying is much less significant early on, and it will keep your HP topped up for later when you may need to defend. Late game, she can use her hyper, which we'll discuss soon, to target down other players who've collected a hefty sum of stars and take them for herself. Try to stay behind other players and avoid fighting without your hyper as much as possible, because a random high roll from Popball or a chicken can set you very far back. Also, choose draw panels when you can, because you have to collect your hyper to stay relevant. Hyper discussion. Suguri's hyper is a boost card called Accelerator. For one chapter, she rolls 2 dice for everything. This allows her to cover huge ground and roll a devastating 13 attack without battle cards. Accelerator is the only reason Suguri is not garbage tier. As I mentioned earlier, you mainly want to save your hypers for late game to hunt down whoever has the most stars, but it has other uses too. Though generally not recommended, it can be used just for the dash effect if you need to reach your home or run away from other players. Some things to keep in mind about your hyper. The effects last an entire chapter, which means it lasts until your next movement roll. Anyone that attacks you before then will have to deal with your double combat rolls. It's also quite pricey at 30 stars, so make sure you're getting your money's worth, or at least denying someone else with it. It's typically not a good idea to use it to land on a bonus panel, unless maybe Miracle is on, but even then, Nice Jingle does the same thing. Also, it's a typical double dice roll, so there's 6 to the power of 2, or 36 different possible outcomes. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but statistically speaking, you're most likely to roll a 7 and least likely to roll a 12 or a 2. Remember this so that you don't get too ambitious. Deck building. Passionate Research is the single best card for Suguri. It's such a good card in general that it was limited to 1 per deck as of patch 1.9.9, and for a character as reliant on her hyper as Suguri, it's really worth putting into the deck. For the same reason, I also choose to include Nice Present. President's Privilege is also a good addition since Accelerator is so expensive, but since it requires level 4, I only run 2 copies. For the battle cards, 3 rainbow colored circles is a staple. It's a dead draw for most characters, but it gives Suguri a huge +4 evasion at the cost of your defense, which you probably won't be using anyway, making it a great card to add to the deck. Final Battle is another good card for Suguri, as you can use it in tandem with Accelerator to ensure that you'll get something out of it. Remember that all of your combat rolls for the entire Final Battle will be done with 2 dice. Using these 2 cards together costs 60 stars though, so you shouldn't really do it unless you really need the kill, or you can make the cost back, or you have President's Privilege. 1 copy of Final Battle since it's limited. I don't run any traps on Suguri, but I do use 2 event cards. I use Little War for the same reason as Final Battle, and it has the added bonus that someone else may use it for me and pay the 40 star cost out of their own pocket. I also put in a Sealed Guardian because it slaughters defensive characters like Kyoko and Fernet, making them instantly vulnerable, whereas Suguri doesn't really care about what HP she's at since she'll be evading most of the time anyway. One copy of both of these two as well, since they're both limited, but I'd run one copy of each even if they weren't due to the high level requirement. Map Synergy. Suguri favours large maps like Highway Heist, Tomomo's Abyss, and Star Circuit. Big maps essentially allow her to choose her fights since she can keep her distance to avoid unnecessary battles and catch up to people to kill them with a quick accelerator. She isn't bothered by battlefield too much since she can usually evade enemies' attacks and oftentimes pick up the odd kill along the way. Charity and Miracle are also field events that Suguri likes because they make it more likely for her to draw her hyper. However, Suguri does poorly on White Winter due to the numerous paths and warp panels, allowing her prey to escape, as well as making it very difficult for her to complete her first few Norma. Similarly, Suguri does not fare too well on the split maps, Lagoon Flight and Sunset, because players on the other half of the map are essentially immune to her accelerator. Parting thoughts. Sora is better.